Hey guys, welcome back to the Unpolitical but Political podcast. I go by the name Destiny, and today we are going to talk about vulnerability. Please go and stream my recent episodes 4 and 5, Effective Communication episode 5, and Emotional Intelligence episode 4. So today we're talking about vulnerability. I just wanted to say, because I've been thinking about this for a while, especially when it came to the topic of vulnerability. Literally, guys, I've literally been thinking, I've gotten to a place in my life now where I can say that when I was in secondary school, I wasn't the most vulnerable individual. I was very laid back and, I would sit and just, I wouldn't say I was, scared or shy. I just wasn't open about what I was going through. A lot of things, especially on the school ground, could have happened, and the teacher would always reassure me if everything was okay throughout the day. And I would literally just tell them everything's fine, nothing happened. And then when she would come back to me and say, oh, you told me that everything was fine, but when I heard that X, Y, and Z happened, and literally I'm not even joking, I would not be open about any of the things that was happening on school ground. I would always just keep it to myself, or just run back home and tell my mum or something. But now I would say I've gotten to a place where I don't hold back anymore. If I have a problem with something, I say it. I just don't see the concept in sitting and dwelling on something that might have occurred on that day. Instead of sitting back and swallowing your pride and trying to play it off as if nothing happened and nothing's bothering you, I think this is in my opinion, I just think the best option is just to say it how it is and just tell people how you feel. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing really is you're just cutting your nose to spite your face. You're not really being honest. Because at the end of the day, life is too short, and you don't want to keep forcing this facade that nothing is happening and no one's affecting you, and you go by this stance of this unbothered aesthetic, and you sort of play it cool. Because at the end of the day, all it's going to do is it's going to hurt you, and it's going to weigh so much more on you when you start to let things affect you that way and you're not open. I think vulnerability can be very important because it's a state of emotional exposure. It just becomes that degree of uncertainty. And I think I've gotten to a stage in my life now where I can say that I have learned how to be vulnerable, especially when it involves the acceptance of willingness to accept that emotional risk, and just being open, not even just from a form of love, but just from a form of self-love and self-care. But yeah, I've just gotten to a place now, and for anyone out there who struggles with vulnerability, honestly, for me personally, I think it's very brave of you and courageous of you if you do come out of your shell and just be vulnerable for a second. A few days ago, I was literally crying, and I was just that's the first time that I've cried in so long. I usually don't really cry as often. It takes a lot for me to cry, and literally just crying and just letting it out was honestly, I released so much tension and so much endorphin, and I felt a sense of weight lifted off me because I cried it out. But for a lot of people out there, being vulnerable can be a very common fear. But it comes to that place where once you understand that the central emotional challenge is a great appreciation for why vulnerability is worth it, it becomes easier for you. For me personally, I think even still today, I don't know if anyone can relate, but as a masculine woman, I feel so secure in my sense of sexuality that I think I've gotten to a place now where I forgot how it feels like to be vulnerable, because I hold myself at such common ground with being not showing people that I am upset and not showing people that I am crying or whatever. I feel so secure in the masculine that I am that I'd rather not show how I feel or what I go through. I'd rather just handle it like a quote unquote like a man. But like, I don't know, I just feel like once I let it out and I cry it out or whatever I need to do to like let it out, it makes the whole concept of like of being vulnerable easier for me. And so yeah, I just don't know. But for other people out there, I know a lot of people actually who are scared to be vulnerable. Like they will never ever show their self crying, or if they do cry, they always tell people, "Oh, like I don't want you to see me crying," or like they will go and do it in like a safe space. So that might be in their room, in their car, anywhere where no one's looking. I remember I was watching this podcast called what was it called? What was it called? It's like a gay podcast about these two women called Emily and somebody else, and they were talking about like crying and like Emily was like, oh, like, you know, sometimes I would go in my car and like just play a lot of music and just end up crying because that was just her way of like letting things out. And they also were talking about like crying in the shower and like how it can be healthy and like just stuff like that, like just anything that just like allows you to like let it out. And she was just saying that was her like her safe space and stuff. So just stuff like that as well. Also, I just wanted to say, guys, thank you so much on supporting me. Like, honestly, I've been checking my analytics lately and you guys have been going hard. Just keep streaming, guys, please. Like, honestly, I really appreciate all of you who've been listening and have found a sense of well-being listening to this. I will keep posting. Sorry about the delay. I am back now, I promise you. But yeah. Also, another thing with vulnerability is that, like, in order to accept and, like, embrace different aspects of yourself, like, in a way, being vulnerable can help with greater confidence and authenticity. Like, you don't even have to, like, be, like, when it comes to, like, the side of your life where you learn to have self-acceptance, being vulnerable isn't as scary anymore. Like, I guess it takes a lot of time to, like, you know, come to terms with who you are in order to find that being vulnerable can be a sign of strength and a sign of resilience and a sign of emotional intelligence. Like, once you understand that you're getting to a point where you are now opening them floodgates, that's already a sign of strength. Like, for me personally, if I have to be honest, I know probably a lot of people are like this, but I don't like crying. Like, I just feel like crying alone, just like, it's not a bad thing and it's healthy as well. But I feel like crying for me personally, I think it's not a sign of weakness, but I just don't like the feeling of crying. Like, I rather just be angry or upset about it other than just cry, because I think it's just like a toxic masculinity phase that for some reason I've now developed, where it's just like I rather just stay stagnant and not cry these things out. Like, I rather just not dwell on it, but like I rather just be really angry about it and really upset about it and like emotionally hurt, that crying is the last thing on my list, if that makes sense. But I feel like in order to feel strength and in order to feel like the sense of self-acceptance is putting yourself in situations where you can feel vulnerable and you can boost your confidence and like believe that you have the ability to handle challenging situations. Because that's the whole concept of life. It's just like going through those feelings and then feeling a resilience in them. Like, even when I was in college, I was literally going through a very hard like time, like mentally, and the only thing that it took me to keep growing and like push forward was a sense of like resilience and being like, do you know what, fuck it, I am just gonna go through this shit and also go to college at the same time and like just battle through these times whilst simultaneously like feeling a self-hatred phase, and like feeling like I don't belong and feeling alone, and like, and this was also in like the thick of COVID, so having anxiety and like being scared to leave the house and like stuff like that. That was all me being vulnerable and like really accepting that this is currently how I'm feeling right now, and I'm just gonna have to, quote unquote, go with the flow. And sometimes self, like being vulnerable can pay off a lot, and like being resilient can pay off a lot, because in the end, as much as you were going through those hard times, like it can pave the way sometimes. Like for me personally, when I was in college, and like I said, I was going through those hard times, as much as I was struggling and like going through all of that stuff, honestly guys, it really paid off, because I was still getting the grades that I was trying to obtain. Like I wasn't, receding in my grades or like going down a grade or anything. Like I kept my flow high and I kept my head up, and I was like, Destiny, you are going through a hard time right now, but like you will still pave the way for yourself, even if it's small or simple. Like you got this, and you can fucking open them. Like you can leave this college with a distinction without fail if you just keep going and not like giving up halfway. And it actually worked for me. I think like after a while, I just started to find like coping mechanisms that helped me go through those times, and like trying to not be hard on myself, and like trying to not allow the work or the pressure to overpower me, essentially. And that's one way that helped me get through those times and like come out with a grade that I wasn't expecting. But yeah, what else? I feel like a lot of people have vulnerability because of situations that have happened in their life. Like I remember I said in my podcast about, I think 2 or 3 podcasts ago, I said that being vulnerable comes from a sense of self-inheritance. So whatever happened in your personal life in the past could, stem as to why you're vulnerable today. So if you were like emotionally rejected, or you had rejection or trauma or abandonment or grief or shame or fear, or a relationship went wrong, you got broken up with, you got a heartbreak, you got abused, you got sexually abused. Trigger warning, anyone listening to this. But sometimes that's what causes people to be vulnerable, is just the self-inheritance and like things that have happened in their past. Sometimes it can be what's it called, generational trauma, which can be like another reason as to why people are vulnerable today. I know a lot of people out there, especially when I was working in M&S, there was one woman in there who was just very vulnerable, and like anything that she took things so seriously and so like to heart, because she thought like, if I don't do this now, or if I don't listen up to what someone is telling me now, or meet up these standards, then I'm just gonna find myself in a very like, she's gonna feel bad for what she did, and she's gonna feel sorry for herself, which is a sense of vulnerability. Like any small thing that she did in that store, even if it wasn't the biggest, she would have to do it anyway, because she always felt like if she doesn't do it, she's gonna feel sorry for herself, and people are not gonna see her as like the top, the top, what's the word I'm looking for? Like people are just not gonna see her for who she is, so she has to meet those criteria in order to feel like she does her job properly. And that was like a really big problem for her as well. She was just very easily like gullible, and like she would just do things for the sake of doing it, or sort of like prioritizing her needs and wants first, and like stuff like that. Also, I've gotten to a place in my life where I just feel like one thing that's really affected me, like not like vulnerability wise, but like in terms of being able to come out and be vulnerable, is feeling like I internalize like negative thoughts. Because sometimes we we internalize negative thoughts by like thinking about things that have happened so long ago or like previously. That's why I said that, like, if you can just only tell people how you feel and stop dwelling on it or budging on it and being so worried about what they think, instead of like, putting your peace first, that's the only way that you can feel a sense of clarity. Because like sometimes, in order to recognize that the things that you go through in life are not like things that will last you for long, they're all temporary. So once you realize that you need to like stop self-sabotaging and like just accept them for what they are, then I guess it becomes easier. For me personally, I internalize negative thoughts all the time. Like, it doesn't matter what I did. Like, I can make a mistake and keep that in the back of my head for so long and just beat myself up because I'm so scared of what other people might think if I come out and say, hey, like, I'm feeling like this because of this, or I'm feeling like this because you said this. But nowadays, I'm just not scared to like hold my guard up and just say it how it is. I'm not scared to sugarcoat or like be scared of how people are going to react or whatever. I just say it how it is, because at the end of the day, I don't want to swallow my pride and make it seem like nothing really affects me when it really does. I think I've now started to process that because I've gotten older, but a lot of people out there struggle to tell people how things are. Like, I have a friend who is so worried about what other people might think if he comes out to them, and I just say to him, like, look, like, at the end of the day, the only thing that you can and will have to do is tell people how you feel. Like, this ties back into effective communication. Like, just alerting people, like, hey, like, you fucked me up here and you upset me here, just to let people know that, like, you have negatively impacted them, or you've done something that doesn't make them feel good, or, your energy was off one day and now, they always say, like, there's a phrase where it's like, you're hot one day and then you're cold the next day. That's just like the narrative that people use to associate someone whose energy or emotional state is very like manic. But yeah, I don't know. I think it is important to learn from past mistakes as well, and like to strive for personal growth instead of dwelling on all the negative things that you might have done, I remember I saw this quote where it says, it's equally important to learn from your, what was it? It was like, it was equally important to learn to forgive your own lapse, like to forgive the things that you've done in the past, no matter how many times you've went around those same mistakes. And like, how you make a continuous mistake because you always think that if I do this, it might come out on the other side better, but it's still the same mistake that you've done before. That's what they mean by forgiving your own lapse. Like, just like battling past the same thing that just battling past the mistake you've made before and just learning how to accept and forgive those is what I'm trying to say. This is also important as well. I mean, at least for me, who I don't struggle to be my authentic self, but like, I think sometimes I get into a place in my life where I minimize myself to meet other people's standards or needs. Like, I forget that I have to be myself in some situations. I guess that was me when I was younger. I was so scared to like be myself that like I would dim my own light just to be accepted and loved by other people. Which is why they always say like being your authentic self and learning how to embrace that can also be a form of vulnerability, because you're not just doing it to meet a checklist or like doing it to meet someone else's standards. You're doing it for yourself. So say for example you've been hurt before, instead of like trying to act like you wasn't hurt, you will instead minimize the risk of being hurt again. So for me personally, I would say the time that I was hurt the most was when I can't remember the time that I was hurt, but when I was hurt in the past, I would always try and hide that. But now that I've gotten older, I try to minimize those things happening again. So like, that might be setting boundaries and like trying to protect my emotional well-being, or that might be probably like reevaluating my friendship circle and being careful with the people that I invite in my life, or being more mindful about who I give information to, or whatever it is, like just to like minimize the risk of being hurt. I say loving yourself is also important. Like, I always tell people that self-love can go so much more further than you trying to put on this facade and like this curated act that you can combat the fear of vulnerability and like not have to worry about those things again. Because a lot of people, when they go through a breakup, they try to put on this facade that they're not heartbroken, and they conquer it like a bad bitch, and they're like, I'll find another man, or I'll find another woman, when realistically they will just go back home and start crying. Which is why I say loving yourself is important. Like, when I had a relationship with my ex, leaving that relationship was so easy for me because I already developed self-love from the get-go. Like, I learned how to create that stance for myself. So if I do go through that type of situation, it's just easier for me to let it go and not have to like worry about it again. Because then you make things less awkward for yourself. Like, but yeah. I think another thing is like, people are so cocky with how they want to be sometimes. Like, instead of aiming for excellence, they always want to aim for like perfection, and like they want to be perfect in everything they do, and like it kind of ties back into this like pretty girl aesthetic and like trying to forcefully do things that will never be that way. Like, they always say like social media is always like a facade and everything's like curated. Like, everything you see on social media is complete bullshit. Like, no one lives the life that they think they're living. Like, that's not how life is, realistically speaking. Everything is curated, everything is fake. People are only showing you what they want to fucking show you. Nothing is real. Like, everything is fake. People's bedrooms, houses, cars, like those are not the houses and the cars and the lifestyle that they like perpetuate on social media. That's not the life that they're living. If anything, they wish they lived a life like that, which is nowhere near true. That's why I think like social media is another reason why people refuse to be vulnerable, because they want to live this perfect aesthetic and like not show anyone that they're hurting and not show a sign of weakness, or like they just almost put like a blind eye to emotional vulnerability, instead of like facing it head on and being like, what, I'm upset today. Like, the only person that I think is the realest when it comes to being on social media is, I don't think anyone's real, to be honest. Like, I can't really think of anyone that comes on social media and is like showing like the side of themselves that not everyone would show. But yeah, I don't know. I just think social media is like the recipe for emotional disaster and like a sense of insecurity and body dysmorphia, and this whole aesthetic of chasing a false high and like positively acting on things that are not, like, basically like trying to be like chasing a false high. Essentially, it's just like trying to be someone that you're not because of social media. There's a lot of things that go into vulnerability, embracing your mistakes. That can be like, obviously making mistakes are also a sign of vulnerability. You don't have to always be right in every situation. And coming to terms with that is also a sense of self-love. Because in a way, mistakes do make you human. And they also give you wealth of experiences to draw on when like helping others. That's why every time I talk about certain things, I always relate it back to my past, because it's a good way of like strongly trying to connect with my entire self, instead of like talking about everything and then not relating it back to something that I've gone through. This is another one. this kind of ties into what's it called? It ties into what's it called? People pleasing. This ties into people pleasing because trying to prove your value to other people, especially to the people who fear vulnerability the most and are trying to show like how worthwhile they are, and always worrying about like how to earn someone or keep somebody or to stop caring about other people, proving that to them is just going to harm you just as much. Like I used to be in a stage in my life where I used to always people please, and I always wanted to show people that I wasn't the way that they thought I was, and I tried to dim my light and prove otherwise instead of just sticking to who I am as a person. Like just stop trying to people please, because the only thing that it does to you, it hurts you even more. Like you constantly live life with this false positivity and this false high of like, I have to live my life this way because if I don't, then this person is not going to see me anymore, or this person is not going to see me for who I am anymore. I think one thing that I started to do, and one thing that I started to use as like a coping mechanism when going through those experiences, is just doing what makes me happy. Like, fuck what anyone has to say at the end of the day. If you want to run and jump off a fucking cliff, go ahead. Like, so long as that makes you happy, do it. Not saying that you should, I'm just saying that as an analogy, because a lot of people feel like they have to live up to this narrative that society has perpetuated on us as human beings. Like, everything that you do in this life is all from societal norms. Like, those are the things that are deemed as normal, and if you don't do it, then you're weird and you're not like everybody else and you're deemed as uncool. Also, I've also stopped putting myself up to this light of looking cool. Like, I used to be someone who'd always want to wear like the most expensive clothing and like these expensive brands, and now I've just gotten to a stage in my life where I'm like, this is the reason why I'm saying this, because it ties into people pleasing. But I used to be one of those people who would wear Hoodrich, Nike, Puma, you list it, Imperial Armani. Like, I would try to live my life on this cool aesthetic instead of just being cool and just wearing simple clothes. Like, you can wear simple clothes and still attract all the cool people, and like, do you know what I mean? You don't have to fit in, you know, just be yourself, wear what you want to wear. But now I've gotten to a stage in my life where I'm like, fuck all of that superficial stuff. Like, in a few years' time, none of this stuff is going to matter. Like, shit is going to, fade, and like, things are going to evolve and change and emerge. Like, what's the point of wasting £100 or more on... Because at the end of the day, all you're doing is just buying... You're not buying the actual clothing, you're just buying it for this brand, which is inherently fucked. Like, you shouldn't have to buy anything for the brand unless it's like good quality, then fair enough. But like, that's what social media has put into our society, is that whatever you buy, it has to be pitch perfect, it has to have a brand, and if it doesn't have that brand, then you have this status of being unpopular or like not as cool, whatever it is. But I think that's false. Yeah, that's really it, guys. Not really a lot that comes with vulnerability other than what I've mentioned. But for any people out there who needs advice on like vulnerability, my advice to you is, like I said in the beginning of this episode, is just like, honestly, at the end of the day, tell people how you really feel. Stop allowing things to like, instead of not batting an eye to it and trying to ignore something that's affecting you. Tell people how you really fucking feel, because at the end of the day, like I said, life is too short to be scared of what people might think or how they're going to perceive you. Like, at the end of the day, you don't want to sit with this built-up anxiety and this built-up turmoil of fear and, anxiety and, like, overthinking, because you could not be open about how you feel to somebody else. Stop swallowing your pride. Say it how it is. tell people how you feel and move on. And if they want to take it wrongly, then take it wrongly. But at the end of the day, vulnerability, like I mentioned, is the key. Like, you just got to tell people how it is, and that's it. Stop holding back, stop budging, like, stop being so afraid to tell people how it is, and stop being so afraid to, like, be filter free. Like, at the end of the day, stop sugarcoating shit. Just say it how it is. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. This has been the Unpolitical But Political podcast. I really hope you enjoyed. I'll definitely try and post again tomorrow. But for the meantime, please stream my podcast on all other platforms. Apple Podcasts, the Amazon Music Podcast, Spreaker, Overcast. And yeah, be ready for this episode. And also stream on Spotify. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in and listening and taking the time out of your productive, busy day to, put my podcast in. But please do take what I said and consider it. It will really help you and impact you in a positive way, and you'll probably feel more fulfilled. But yeah, I have been Destiny. Thank you for listening to the Unpolitical But Political podcast. And I'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned. I'm about to post this one right now, so stay tuned.